Hiya, welcome to my Compound Life. This is a channel where we build assets, we build habits, and we build freedom. And that should hopefully be financial freedom for every one of us, right? So build assets, build great habits to go about in managing whatever assets that you have got. And of course, all of this will lead to building great freedom for all of us. So freedom, not always about money or wealth, right? Of course, I think there are some truth to it. But certainly freedom that will give you more time back, like what I have right now. And more importantly, I get to share all of this with you guys through my Compound Life YouTube channel. So thanks for watching. Please hit subscribe, hit the like. If you haven't already done so, even if you don't like my content, just hit the like, hit subscribe for the hell of it. Help me out as a small content creator, and I'm really appreciate on all of that effort. Right? Hit like, hit subscribe. Right now, I'm on my 22nd subscriber count. So we'll be very, very grateful if you can become my 23rd to my 25th subscribers today. So hit it right now. Okay, so this is a daily Bitcoin video. Let's quickly look at the fear and greed index. We are today on the 15th of December, the Monday. I hope all of you had a good weekend. Weather was extremely sunny over the weekend in the UK. Well, not over the weekend. I think it's only on Sunday. Pretty sunny weather. But now it's rain. Always raining in the UK, in the Midlands, right? So 15th of December, around 10 a.m., fear and greed index. We are still at the fear zone of 24. Yesterday was a slight improvement of 27. You know, we obviously dropped. I think a lot of it was due to the Bitcoin dip last night in the UK time, where Bitcoin dipped to around 87,600 in US dollars. Of course, we have since now returned back to about 89.9. Okay, so do have the expectation that, you know, bear markets might be just around the corner. I've spoke about it before. You know, we always need to be prepared whether, you know, we might get back to a relief rally or have the expectation that, you know, we might get back into a bearish situation. So this is why it's always important to have a hodl bag as well as a swing bag, you know. So the hodl bag, you can always be extremely bullish with Bitcoin, right? And you need to be bullish with Bitcoin because it's one of the greatest and top performing asset that returns pretty decent CAGR on a yearly basis, right? And of course, you have a swing bag just so that you can buy low, sell high, take some profit, take some lifestyle chips off the table so that you can fund for your retirement, like myself, right? So having a swing back, you know, you can be bullish as well as bearish too, you know. So for the time being, it does seem we might be going into a bearish situation. My sound hasn't returned yet. Apology for that. Okay, so obviously I don't really have that. There are no ETF data that comes through over the weekend, so we can't really get a full visibility of what retails are doing. But I just want to quickly recap in terms of the inflows and outflow for last week, full week, Monday to Friday. It seems last week was a positive week for Bitcoin. Total inflow of 286 million inflow. So that's positive because we definitely had negative outflow for the past 5 weeks, right? The week before was positive inflow, but it was very, very minimal buying, $70 million worth of Bitcoin. So as you can see, last week, just this past last week, 286 million inflow. So I think it's positive. It's coming back somehow, right? So I just want to spend quickly to chat a little bit about the demand for Bitcoin, because somehow I still felt maybe throughout my video I may sometimes sound bearish, but I just want to give you guys a sense of what's going on in the market. But at the same time, I haven't focused too much on the bullish news, which I also want to highlight that in this specific video, right? So ETF flow, the demand of ETF, right, is actually gobbling up all of the Bitcoin as well as Ethereum, right? So if you're new to my video on a daily basis, I kind of update whether, the past day for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, ETF only, right? So buying Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum through ETF only. So I kind of give highlights whether it is bearish or bullish. But I kind of felt it's not giving you a full picture, right? So this is why I want to give you that full picture right now, right? So for the last 7 days, right, Bitcoin ETF, right, they bought approximately 3,170 Bitcoin, okay? And the network actually minted 3,150 Bitcoin, right? So essentially what that indicates, ETF alone, right, absorbed over 100.6% of all of the new issuance, of all of the new supply, right? So this is why it kind of does feel that this specific Bitcoin cycle, it's not really driven by hype or driven by retails anymore. Yes, of course, retail buys the ETF, right? However, what I'm referring to, it's no longer driven by retail that buys Bitcoin from the exchange. So in a way, Bitcoin now does have that stability now, because the TradFi, the traditional finance, are starting to buy, and they are buying at a more consistent level. And at the same time, consistency is good. Essentially means more money will be pouring in a very consistent manner, right? Certainly it takes out a lot of volatility. And of course, with more of the ETF in place, it also gives the indication that maybe Bitcoin will not fluctuate that much, and very likely will not have a blow off top, right? Like a parabolic run in a very, very short period of time, right? So it does kind of explain why this specific cycle, if you kind of believe that Bitcoin still goes through a 4-year cycle, Bitcoin certainly did a very good run from the bottom, about 16,000, running up to about the top all-time high of 126,000 USD. However, that there isn't just a short burst of parabolic movement, right? Because it's all to do with ETF buying. They consistently buy, it pushed the price higher. But at the same time, ETF, they also consistently rebalance, right? So if they say, I only want 5% of Bitcoin or Ethereum in my portfolio at any point of time, because Bitcoin, the price increase will be ultra fast. So that's why they will also sell off Bitcoin and rebalance their portfolio, right? So compared to more of the retail investors like yourself, like myself, we have always been trained to think that I will only cash out at the all-time high, or I will only, all in at the bottom, which in reality, you should really never do that, right? Because unless you're really good at timing, for which I'm terrible at timing. So that's why I always pound cost average in or pound cost average out too, right? So bear that in mind. And a little bit of highlights in terms of Ethereum, okay? So last 7 days for Ethereum bought through ETF was around 67,532. And in fact, the network only issued or minted approximately 18,577 worth of Ethereum. So Ethereum ETF, like people, retail buying through the ETF, they gobble up about 3,635% of all of the new supply, right? So there will be a supply shock coming, right? However, it's not exactly now. I still truly believe that, I made a video the other day to call out specifically that the big whales, the OGs, are selling off Bitcoin and Ethereum really fast, right? Essentially, it's because many of these people do believe in the 4-year cycle, and they also know that the 4-year cycle has previously ended with a big Bitcoin all-time high of 126,000. So that's why they're all getting out, right? So I just felt we just need to get through this this hurdle, and then the sell pressure will reduce for sure. Okay, so I think there are a few key insights here, right? So when price does not react even after supply is absorbed, it usually means a few things, right? Some holders are selling, like the whales I've mentioned. Coins are moving from weak hands to stronger hands, right? So I think this is the reality, right? Especially, Bitcoin gotten to a price of 126K, and then it dropped so much to about 89,000 right now, right? So a lot of new investors, they cannot take this kind of volatility, right? So a lot of my friends were asking, John, are you okay, right? I mean, I can only go back to them and say, yeah, definitely, because I've been through that volatility, and this kind of volatility is nothing new to me, right? Because I've been through it, right? More importantly, I'm trying to explain to them you have to have a hodl bag as well as swing bag, yada, yada, yada. But some of this don't really, resonate with newish investors, right? They don't really have that kind of concept. All they would think about is, I've got a lump sum of money. I just need to time it and go in, and then very likely I'll lump sum out, right? So they don't even get the, pound cost average, dollar cost average in. So that's why, for us to be in Bitcoin, we need to have a slight mentality or habits changes, right? So that's why I kind of started this channel, just so that more of us can get a feel of what's going on in the market from a novice or amateur investor's point of view, right? And how can we still benefit and win in the market through great habits that we adopt, right? And one thing for sure is pound cost average, dollar cost average can really help us to get the most out from the Bitcoin cycles, right? And of course, there simply is not a demand problem for Bitcoin, right? Based on the number of Bitcoin gets issued, the number of Ethereum gets issued. However, it does seem that it has a liquidity timing problem, and the price is kind of lagging behind, right? So liquidity timing problem, QE, just only started, right? So the government shut down, QE just recently started. It is a timing issue, right? And then of course, with Japan. I'll talk about Japan in just a moment. So it does seem it's a liquidity problem. And with the liquidity plus timing problem, that's kind of pulling the Bitcoin price down a little bit, right? A lot to take in, guys. So I think something to look out for this specific week. So this specific week will be pretty important for Bitcoin, right? And I'm just going to call out a few key dates, and essentially can make Bitcoin even growth stocks. If you and I, we all invest in growth stocks, the Mag 7, it's gonna make this week ultra choppy, right? So key data will help determine whether the US Fed will cut more rate in January 2026, right? So Monday, 15th of December, that's today, Empire State Manufacturing Index, early read on US manufacturing data, right? So any hint of weaker growth or dovish tones supports more cuts, and we want that, right? And essentially more liquidity, and that would be good for Bitcoin. Anything that's hawkish tone, investors will be risk off, right? So they'll be selling off Bitcoin, selling off more growth stocks, etc., right? So I think, in this kind of situation, it's best not to buy Bitcoin or to sell Bitcoin, right? I just simply felt not the best time to buy because, with all of this data that comes out, anything hawkish, right, it's going to lead investors to want to sell off. And it does seem, looking at the current Bitcoin chart, we are only stone throw away getting back into the 200 days moving average. And if that's the case, Bitcoin will potentially drop to about 74,000, and then quickly fell down to about 55,000. Okay, so if that's the case, that will be a time we need to be ultra bullish with our hodl bag, right? And as well as our swing bag, this is where we can buy the low and profits the most after. Okay, and Tuesday the 16th, this is a big one. That's the delayed non-farm payroll data, delayed for October and November jobs report, as well as the retail sales data for October, and of course flash PMI manufacturing and services data. So how will this impact Bitcoin, right? Any weak job or weak retail data will essentially means market price in for more easing, right? Generally bullish for Bitcoin. And of course, if the data is strong, that means US Fed will stay cautious and decide not to cut the rate, right? And generally, it's simply not great for a risk asset like Bitcoin. And of course, Thursday, 18th of December, that will be the inflation day. US CPI for November, core CPI for November, data comes out. Weekly jobless claims, Philly Fed manufacturing index, etc., right? So if we do have lower than expected CPI, that means inflation under control, right? So more room for cuts. That will be bullish for Bitcoin, okay? So if CPI comes out hot, right, maybe the Fed cut too soon, essentially means use up risk asset, including Bitcoin, can dump, right? So it's gonna be a choppy week. Just bear that in mind, right? Thursday could be quite a key one. And of course, Friday, 19th of December, I think there will be some University of Michigan consumer sentiment data, existing home sales data for November. I don't think this will be huge impacting Bitcoin, but any wipes data, weak sentiment or soft housing adds to slow down narratives, support more easing. Okay, hang on. Oh, okay, apology, I'm back. Delivery guy, AliExpress, ordered something from AliExpress. Oh yeah, I might do some review on my vlog gears, because I buy a lot of like accessories for my DJI Osmo Nano. We'll talk about it in another video. Okay, so coming back to daily Bitcoin update. Okay, so a lot of data coming out this week. I think do expect Bitcoin to be ultra choppy. Yeah, do expect that. What I want to talk about, knowing that it's ultra choppy, right? And the fact that bear flag already formed. I think I've got a video yesterday that specifically talk about that. It's not exactly great situation for Bitcoin right now, right? Because bear flag, there will definitely be short-term risk in a way that we may drop back to 200 SMA very, very soon. But certainly, I can still see strong accumulation in the process, right? Even from the ETF. So I do also questions, will we drop back to the 200 days simple moving average, right? But certainly it's not exactly all doom and gloom, if we do fall back into a 200-day simple moving average, right? Because that simply means there will be so much accumulation, right, at that zone, and essentially, will take us out, will bring us out or lead us out from a bear market very, very soon. Okay. So somehow I do see a few scenarios that can potentially play out, right? So I'm just going to call out two scenarios. The first scenario will be QE liquidity returns, right? So essentially that means the bear flag fails, right? And Bitcoin breaks higher in the coming few weeks. ETF accelerate buying because, investors will come back. Retail investors will be coming back. And then a relief rally at the corner, maybe by Q1 2026. Okay, that's scenario one, right? But there can also be a scenario B where liquidity stays tight longer, right? So of course, that means Bitcoin will probably sweep lower support and very likely, break through the 74,000 support, and then very soon go back down to the 55,000 support area for 200 days moving average. But of course, a lot of weekends will exit, so this essentially means capitulation, right? And does that mean strategy will capitulate too? Will strategy be selling more Bitcoin, etc.? I think this would be, under this scenario too, right? And of course, for this scenario, if Bitcoin does get back to that level, I do anticipate strong hands accumulate more cheaply, and this could well signal a short-term bear cycle for Bitcoin, right? Because it fell down so quick, and then essentially, there will be some sort of V-shaped recovery, right? Because if the US business cycle does kicks in next year, right? Essentially, this should all lead on to a much faster recovery, right? In both cases, I think ETF will continue to absorb all of the supply for Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and so forth, right? So I do hope that, under both scenario, it will be less of a pain in comparison to the previous cycles that I've been through, right? Yeah, I think that's my take of the two scenario. And of course, I think, something to look out for this week. That will be the macro, where Bank of Japan bond yields and liquidity issue. The Bank of Japan expected rate hike on the 19th of December. So that's on a Friday. So that's actually the biggest near-term macro risk for Bitcoin for all of us to look out for, right? So this week we've got heaps of data, right? Heaps of data, whether it would be positive. Anything positive will help Bitcoin price regain back to about 90-ish thousand, right? I don't even foresee it to break 94,000 anymore, right? However, apart from this week data, Friday with the Japan bond yield announcement, by Friday we should determine whether there will be a rate cut or a rate hike. Very likely a rate hike, not rate cut in Japan, right? So Bank of Japan hikes, Japanese bond yield rise, yen carry trade unwinds, essentially global liquidity tightens even more, right? So people will have to sell off their risk assets, include Bitcoin, their stocks and shares, etc., and face a lot of pressure, right? So this explains why Bitcoin is consolidating in a bear flag structure, despite strong demand underneath. With this Japanese unwind, carry trades unwind, it will have that short-term headwinds because there's simply not enough liquidity out there in the market, okay? So, key question now, will the US quantitative easing help this, right? Because I think, US has started QE on the 12th of December, right? I think straightforward answer, probably yes, right? But there's a but. The timing really matters, right? So quantitative easing essentially means US Federal Reserve creates liquidity. They buy bonds, pushes bond yield lower, right? Encourage capital back into risk asset. And QE directly will hopefully offset Bank of Japan tightening, whatever Bank of Japan tightening is doing, right? And of course, I do hope that with QE in place, that, the US will have to continuously print. US bond yield falls, global liquidity improves, dollar pressure eases, right? And risk appetites return. But do not expect this to happen anytime soon, right? So I'm talking more about Q2 next year in order for us to see that effect, right? So, we just have to embrace Bitcoin, embrace the volatility until much later next year. So I don't foresee a Christmas Santa rally, but I certainly hope, we can continue to regain that 90,000 and just be choppy until next year. But I am also sensing that, potentially we can get lower, right? If that's the case, it's also a blessing for people out there to accumulate Bitcoin at a low price of 70,000-ish or 55,000-ish, right? So I wouldn't even be accumulating at 70K, right? I'll probably accumulate at 55K. So that's my stance to it, okay? So overall, I think some of the key takeaway, Bank of Japan tightening is a temporary liquidity shock. Might as well bring Bitcoin back down to 200 days simple moving average of 55,000, okay? So that's something to look out for. It might happen by end of December or January, right? ETF demand is absorbing all of the Bitcoin supply. However, it's still insufficient, right, for us to get back into any bullish situation or even get back to that 50 days moving average with so much unwinding going on like Japan, right? I'm hoping the US quantitative easing would neutralize this pressure quickly. However, I don't anticipate any of that to enter the market until maybe Q2 next year, right? So it's not as if QE apply instantaneously Bitcoin will pump, right? It will pump to an extent because of the news, but for any of such liquidity to pour into Bitcoin and risk asset, it will take time, right? It will take time for investors to get back into the slightly more positive sentiment before they're willing to release anything, right? So yeah, that's it for today. Not a lot of exciting news for Bitcoin. Yeah, but I do have excitement maybe towards Q2 or end of Q1 next year, right? So more exciting things to look forward to. However, we simply just need to get through this choppiness of Bitcoin, and at the same time, potential more downside coming for Bitcoin. Okay, so that's it for today. If you like my content, please hit the like, hit subscribe, and become my subscribers 23rd to the 25th, and I'll appreciate that. I'll give you guys a call out too, right? And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.